I will never forget the first time I saw Cleopatra, standing on the prow of her golden barge, her presence so commanding that even the waters of the Nile seemed to ripple in reverence. I was but a lowly scribe in her court, entrusted with documenting the queen's triumphs and tragedies, and yet that moment was seared into my soul. Her eyes met mine briefly as the crowd roared their adoration, and in that fleeting glance, I saw not just a ruler, but a woman bearing the weight of a kingdom on her shoulders. Little did I know, I would bear witness to her greatest glories and her ultimate downfall. I am Amon, a scribe who served in Cleopatra's court, recording her victories, alliances, and intimate moments of vulnerability. From the shadows of her throne room to the battlefields of Actium, I observed the queen's life unfold, my quill capturing both her radiance and her despair. I was no stranger to the corridors of power, yet Cleopatra's court was unlike any other. The air itself seemed charged with her will, an intoxicating blend of fear and admiration. When she first returned from exile, her brother Ptolemy's forces still nipping at her heels, I doubted she would last a month. But Cleopatra was a serpent coiled and cunning, striking when least expected. Her alliance with Caesar began with a spectacle. Smuggled into his quarters, she unrolled from a carpet like a goddess, revealing herself to mortals. Caesar was charmed, and who could blame him? Cleopatra's voice was a melody that lingered, her intelligence a blade honed to perfection. The two became lovers, their union cementing her claim to the throne. But whispers of scandal spread to the court like wildfire. The queen of Egypt and the ruler of Rome entwined in a dangerous dance. Even as she basked in Caesar's favor, Cleopatra's hold on power remained precarious. The people of Egypt, weary of Roman influence, looked to her for stability. She worked tirelessly to strengthen her position, investing in Alexandria as a center of learning and culture. I remember her walking through the great library, her fingers brushing ancient scrolls, her mind ever turning with plans for Egypt's future. Yet, there was always the shadow of Caesar's ambitions, and when he declared himself dictator for life, murmurs of rebellion began to echo through the empire. When Caesar was assassinated, the world seemed to shift. Cleopatra's eyes, once so full of fire, clouded with a storm of grief and uncertainty. Her son, Caesarion, was both her hope and her greatest vulnerability. Would the Romans rally around the child of their fallen leader, or would they see him as a threat to be eliminated? Her days were filled with the dual weight of ruling her kingdom and protecting her son. She strengthened her ties to her people, appearing before them as Isis incarnate, a symbol of divine guidance. Then came Mark Antony, where Caesar was calculating, Antony was passion incarnate. Their love burned fiercely, consuming all in its path. I remember watching them feast in Alexandria, their laughter echoing through the marble halls, as if they were gods among mortals. Yet, even in those moments of joy, shadows lurked. Octavian, Caesar's heir, was a storm gathering on the horizon. Cleopatra and Antony's union became the talk of the empire. Antony's gifts to Cleopatra, territories in the eastern provinces, incensed Rome, and Octavian seized the chance to paint Cleopatra as a foreign menace. Antony and Cleopatra's alliance was not merely one of love, but of strategy. Together, they sought to forge an empire that could rival Rome. I stood in the throne room as they plotted their course, Antony's booming voice contrasting with Cleopatra's measured tones. They minted coins bearing their images, a bold declaration of their shared rule. But Rome's Senate branded them traitors, and Octavian's propaganda painted Cleopatra as a sorceress who had bewitched Antony. The tension was palpable as emissaries came and went, carrying ultimatums and veiled threats. The world seemed to hold its breath as the two sides prepared for war. The Battle of Actium was our undoing. I stood on the shores, my heart heavy as our fleet burned. Cleopatra's barge, so magnificent in peacetime, became a symbol of desperation as she fled the carnage. Antony followed her, abandoning his men to their fate. The sight of his despair haunted me, a warrior reduced to a man chasing the ghost of his former glory. Back in Alexandria, Cleopatra fortified the city and sought ways to negotiate, but Antony was a shadow of his former self, consumed by shame and anger. Their once bright love was strained under the weight of impending defeat. Back in Alexandria, the city braced for the inevitable. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, sought to negotiate with Octavian, but his terms were harsh. He wanted her as his trophy, paraded through Rome in chains. I witnessed her final preparations, her chambers filled with treasures she hoped to send away, her children's futures weighing heavily on her mind. She spoke to me once during those dark days, her voice tinged with both resolve and sorrow. "Aman," she said, "my story will not end in submission." In those final weeks, Cleopatra's court became a flurry of activity. She met with advisors, prepared her children for survival, and walked the halls of the palace with a quiet dignity. I often saw her standing by the window, gazing at the Nile as if seeking solace from its ancient waters. When news came that Antony had fallen on his sword after hearing false reports of her death, I saw her grief etched on her face. She locked herself away for hours, emerging with a calm that was almost otherworldly. In the end, Octavian's legions breached Alexandria. The palace, once a beacon of splendor, became a tomb. Cleopatra's final moments were shrouded in secrecy, but I was there when the news broke. The queen was dead, a serpent clasped to her breast. Some said she chose the asp, a symbol of her sovereignty, to defy Rome even in death. Others whispered that Octavian's hand was behind it. I like to believe it was her final act of defiance, ensuring that even in death, she would remain unbroken. Her death marked the end of an era. I remained in Alexandria, my quill now devoted to preserving her legacy. As I pen these words, I wonder what history will remember. Will Cleopatra be the cunning seductress who ensnared Rome's greatest men, or the last true pharaoh of Egypt, a woman who dared to dream of an empire restored? To me, she will always be the queen who faced her destiny unflinching, her spirit unbroken even as the world crumbled around her. I still see her in my dreams, standing tall on the prow of her barge, the Nile stretching endlessly behind her. Cleopatra may have left this world, but her story endures, a testament to the indomitable will of a queen who dared to defy the might of Rome.